Hello, everybody. It looks like we're trickling in as we do. We do have a few announcements to start us off today. We're looking at what likely will be a short meeting because we added this meeting on in order to accomplish this last task of our 2021 winter-spring push. So welcome, everybody. The most notable thing we're going to do today is do our vote on the elder abuse set and welcome, and we'll go through the agenda now. Next slide, please. We always welcome everyone to the meeting. We do mute everybody upon entry. Again, as many of you know, this is Sarah DeSilvi. I do try to work the chat pretty religiously, so if anybody wants to offer anything to the conversation, we encourage you to put it into the chat. Please do send any chat to everybody, and then I'll integrate it into the conversation. I always note that if you send a chat to me, I'm likely just to read it out loud because I can't discern as I'm presenting individual messages from public ones. So best just to send it to everybody. And then if there's something you want to say to me specifically, you can email me after. Every public call is recorded and available on the Confluence after the call for review. All right, next slide, please. This is our antitrust practices slide. Next slide, please. As we close out this really intense push that we've gone on together, this adventure, we want to remind everybody about the importance of officially joining the project as a member. So that first link is the link to officially join the project. If you want to check whether or not you've signed up, or if others from your organization have signed up, you can review the existing membership at this second link. And then again, the Confluence is a really robust assemblage of information on everything we do, whether it be our terminology build, our technical build, upcoming announcements. We also have a link to all of our different committees on there, so there's a lot to explore. We welcome you all to go there. Next slide, please. Again, and always, a big thank you to all of the organizations that kicked in to set us off as project founders, all of the organizations that supply grant funding, and all of the orgs and individuals that offer in-kind support. We would not be here without all of you all. Next slide, please. We are a funded operation, so a funded project. So if you'd like to investigate funding our 2021 and really now 2022 operations, you can always reach out to Gravity Projects at emiadvisors.net, or there is a specific space on the Confluence that details how to become a sponsor. We had gotten a couple inquiries via email about how, like, if you were an organization that's already sponsored, where to see that sponsorship. And we want to note, so of course, there's the slide that we present every meeting, but that sponsorship page on the Confluence is a living, ongoing document. So if you wanted to reference that for any of the work you're doing within your organizations, that should be there and is up to date. And if it's not, just send us an email and we'll make sure it is. Next slide, please. So we have me doing announcements and then some project schedule overview. My lovely colleague Asha will talk about some work we're spearheading with the Interventions Council. You'll remember us talking about that over the course of the last few months. We're going to detail just a few updates regarding the social isolation and intimate partner violence consensus voting results. We will conduct the elder abuse consensus vote, which also includes a brief update on things that will change. So if you've looked at the master a little while ago and haven't looked at it recently, there are a few updates we just want to put in front of everyone's mind before the vote. Mark is away, so there is not a policy update per se. He did present at the last meeting regarding US CDI, and so Bob will present on tech, and then community homework and next steps. Next slide, please. Announcements, next slide. We always try to give a shout out to the Fire ID public meetings. This is where Bob leads the work that's specifically focused on the implementation guide. Those are Wednesdays from 3 to 4 Eastern Standard Time. Again, many of the links that you see in the chat, you have to click on twice in order to get to the end page because of WebEx proxies. It's just keep on clicking and it will get you there. We are scheduled to revise our intended presentation for the ONC workshop on advancing SDOH data use and interoperability on July 13th. Originally, it was scheduled for June 19th, but or June 17th, or actually it was 18th, June 18th, but then because of the federal holiday for Juneteenth, it was rescheduled to be this Tuesday. So you can find us there. There's a whole host of other announcements you can find on the Gravity announcements page on the Confluence. Next slide, please. Again, and always, we are very excited to state that the CDC did approve the ICD upward, at least a section of the ICD updates, the ICD application that we presented in March. I want to highlight that the codes that were approved were in the education sector, so less than a high school diploma. The splitting of the inadequate drinking water supply and lack of adequate food. So we have mirroring really the international ICD, this Z58, which is problems related to physical environment, which allows for Z58.6, which is a specific code for inadequate drinking water supply. We also have some specified types of homelessness in order to direct critical resources and triage resources to those who might be unsheltered. There are also really obvious use cases for sheltered and unsheltered homelessness within the current pandemic. In Z59.4, you can see the specific food and security code. Again, this is not all the new code. This is just all the code that can fit on the slide because ICD, in order to make it robust, there's all kinds of other codes that wrap around any change. And then in Z59.81, again, this is really thinking about the financial sequelae of the pandemic, really necessary coding regarding housing instability, which was a completely unrepresented concept in ICD in the past. So thinking about the sunsetting of that eviction moratorium and all the individuals that are affected by that, you have a general housing instability code, and then these acutely concerning risk of homelessness and history of homelessness codes. Really, really grateful for everyone's work on this. And again, we are on schedule to meet, be at the September meeting to discuss the remaining elements of that submission. So things like transportation insecurity and the veteran code and the material hardship and financial insecurity codes. So hopefully those will all get sorted over the course of the next few months. Again, thanks everybody. You can now go directly, and it's been posted into the link to the formal CDC announcement and CDC documentation. So if your organization wants to reference the formal document, it's now available publicly. Next slide, please. We're also really excited to state that in response really to community demands, we tried to listen. We've created a new spot on the Confluence, which we're calling our domain code dashboard. We wanted to be able to show individuals really simply all of the release terminology that's in existence right now for each different domain. So you can see if you follow the link, every single domain has a section on a table. We have our 4 activities, screening, diagnoses, goals, and interventions language. You can see that what we've done is organize it from basically select codes present. This is when there's some codes there that might be helpful to comprehensive list of codes present. And that means not necessarily that everything's there, but you can, there's critical screening panels there, there's critical diagnoses concepts, there's sufficient goals language, and there's a set of interventions codes. And then with every scheduled release of every terminology, whether it be LOINC with registry, SNOMED CT with SNOMED International, or ICD-10 CM, we will update a spreadsheet that you'll be able to access as well. So this is kind of the difference between the master set we create, which is both existent code and the dream, and the code in progress. So you will also note on these final lists that there are some edits as we work with the authors, specifically in SNOMED CT. There's often subtle changes in order to align with existing terminology. So this is the final set of things that we promise are there. And even if we know something's coming down the pike, for instance, in an upcoming SNOMED release, it won't be in here until it's ready to go. So we hope this helps implementers and testers and working with the IG. It really pairs very well with some of our pilot work to come. Oh, that's right. Corey, that's a good question. Thanks for being a really good editor. It shouldn't be ICD. It looks like that just didn't get changed. And I don't actually think that this is a live shot of the confluence. I think it's no picture. It should be SNOMED CT. All right, and we'll just note that we'll go back and edit that together. Thank you so much, Corey. That was a typo. We can definitely testify that the heft of all the interventions language happens within SNOMED CT because we are happy to state we just did a lot of work with SNOMED to complete the housing terms, and we're moving on shortly to other domains. So, any other questions on this domain dashboard? Again, we do really help it hopes with people who are testing and implementing because it really is a collation of what exists. And in some sense, also, it's a grown-up version of the compendium that I worked on with UCSF Siren in 2018.
Sarah, I just want to comment that I think this is terrific. It shows how much has been done and it's really useful. So I would just like to comment that I hope some version of this or a very enthusiastic link to it gets onto the home page at Confluence so people who know nothing don't have to wade through that huge page in order to see what's been accomplished here.
Yeah, let's see. We'll see if we can elevate it a little bit.
Great.
Yeah, and I do agree that for many novices, this is some of the most tangible and practical outputs that the Gravity Project Terminology Division has. So it's great to make it as obvious as possible.
And not just for novices. I'm thinking more of media and policy.
I love it, Lucy. Yeah.
They're not novices for what they do, but they're definitely novices trying to figure out what we do. And the Confluence page design should recognize that and put this way up there.
Lucy, I really, really appreciate that. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Great.
And then, so Jim has a comment regarding domains. So we actually, Jim, have independently worked on mapping screening questions and answers to different ICD-10 diagnostic terminology and links. So we just let us know. You can send us an email offline. That was part of our existing work with our colleagues at Sync Health. And Carrie, I'm glad that it's useful. And just so everyone knows, what we did with the mapping initiative is basically every standardized nationally disseminated tool we mapped to prepare, and then had crosswalks with screening questions and answers and SNOMED and ICD-10 diagnostic terminology to enable implementation. So hopefully that will come soon to you all, so you can use that too. Again, we really try to make sure that as we're doing our work, we're creating as many practical tools as possible for the people on the ground. And we appreciate all feedback. Evelyn's so true. Any other thoughts? All right, thanks everyone. And Lucy, again, thank you so much. You're so good at highlighting. I think it's hard to see some areas of improvement when you're so deep within it. And I really always just appreciate your perspective. You highlight things well. All right, next slide, please. Oh, sorry. How can we note that there aren't codes for something? Do you mean, well,
Say to be done, TBD. Where there
Yeah,
aren't
so
codes, TBD.
yeah, and the absence of a check mark means there's nothing there, right? So if we feel like if we can go back just quickly to that table again, you can see like in housing instability, there are there are insufficient codes in diagnoses and goals and interventions to even put a check mark here. So there's nothing there, right? But we do have a lot of screeners built so far. So as you and what you'll be seeing over the course of the SNOMED build and the ICD-10 release is we'll be able to put a check mark when these codes are in the ecosystem in September and October. We'll be able to say that they're there, right? So we didn't say to be determined. I suppose we could. We just left it blank. But when we put a check mark there, we mean something's interesting in this section. Go look, and here's the table, because we wanted to have people not even bother downloading the spreadsheet if there was nothing there for them to find. Like if you're specifically looking for screening terminology for housing instability, and there's nothing, no check mark there, come back and and we'll, when you see the X, you can go deeper.
Sarah,
What
would it
about
make sense to add USCDI to these parens or not really?
If you could help me understand how that would integrate, I mean, given that USCDI is really the referencing of these terms within the structure of the IG, I mean, I suppose we could have a separate USCDI timeline, like,
But this is Bob, let me make a comment. What you have here under activities is actually what USCDI is representing for social determinants of health. So it's actually representing the activity of screening using LOINC and the activity of diagnosis or health concerns using SNOMED CT and ICD-10. It's representing goals. We have a little bit of a gap here using LOINC and SNOMED CT, and ultimately interventions using SNOMED CT, HICPICS, and CPT. So it's representing the activities as the elements of social determinants of health, and then indicating what code systems are appropriate to use for those particular activities. So she really has represented um, uh, the work that's being done already on this slide and on the page.
That's
right?
great, Bob. Maybe in the introduction to this, one or two sentences why we post this. Just for people who, again, who may come to our page with some vague notion that there is something called USCDI, and when something gets there, it has to be done. It's required. Just to relate all of this to that, that's what I was groping for.
No, it's a great idea. In fact, I think we just need to go and relabel activities, or at least put parentheses after it indicating USCDI SDOH category. And I think that
Terrific.
would
Yeah,
then start to pull it together.
that would
Sarah,
do
does
it.
that make sense to you?
Definitely. Thank you.
that makes sense. Yeah.
So to clarify my concern, so some screening tools, some survey questions that I've happened on, there is no equivalent LOINC codes for it, and you kind of have to generalize it to a really broad phrase. The difference between like, are you homeless versus are you at risk of losing your homeless, or are you at risk of losing your housing? There's not a great coverage for like questions that are asking about risk or things that are time time frame dependent, like within the last year,
So,
or the last week.
so Jim, I
So
think you can find a lot. So we've already built a whole host of our screening, the tools that were in our data sets into Loink. So you might want to review the Excel spreadsheets that are there for critical tools that are already there and and you can then compare with the master for the ones that are coming, right? Like the, key questions from the American Housing Survey or the Housing Vital Sign or the Nehruziman tool or the VA homelessness screener. So these are all in the pipe. Is that helpful?
um Yes, but well, I'm trying to say like it's really good progress, but it's the gaps that are not it's the gaps are hardest to find because there's like an imperfect mapping between how a question may be represented with another tool's question.
Yeah, so maybe you can write me offline because we have studied very extensively the mapping between existing screening tools in order to align with our proposed diagnostic terminology and have documents regarding that. And
Okay.
then we also, the difference between the master as posted and the terms currently available, there is a whole lot of, we know, for instance, what LOINC panels are still are in the pipeline and will be coming shortly.
Okay.
Is that helpful?
Yeah, I think maybe that's just what I'm seeing. I'm only seeing what is already available. So yeah,
Oh
I'll
yeah,
email
so
those over.
so yeah, send me an email. I would love to walk you through what we propose, what's in build, and what's here.
Hmm. Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions I can assist with? Okay, and
Great
then,
job, Sarah.
oh, this is,
Multiple implications and consequences and evocations for us to think about. Thanks.
thank you. And then yes, so we have, right? So this is partly why you can see an X on the some of the most robust, some of the only checks you see is in like, right? Because the screeners for housing instability and homelessness were some of the first things that we worked on. And so most of the US standard tools are about the only thing that we're still working on, and Linda can correct me, I think we're still working on building the housing vital sign, which is a critical anchor in some of the housing instability terminology.
Currently, it seems like you have this two categories, either, or I guess three categories: no codes, select codes, and comprehensive list. Just wondered, how do you get to the last spot for the screeners that already have had their LOINC concept codes identified? Does that mean you get in the most rightward comprehensive list as an X, or is there something else that gets you into that column?
So if we're missing, like for instance, once the housing vital sign is a really crucial validated standardized tool that links directly to the ICD-10 CM language that we've proposed, right? And there really aren't that very many other good standardized questions that map directly to this diagnostic terminology. So when that gets built, that's when we'll be like, okay, good to go, right? So there's some questions there. There's a critical missing piece. So once that piece is built, it'll move over into the comprehensive list. So we basically are constant because we're trying to think about users, right? The people on the ground. Like if there's a missing question set that really enables efficiencies to our proposed diagnostic terminology, we don't want to give it a comprehensive assessment yet. Does that make sense?
Okay, it's just it would be helpful to understand some of the reasons why there are gaps, as people approach this document, to have a way to know what those are.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Again, for this audience, which I think is an excellent tool, just figuring out where we are on that roadmap from right to left,
I think that's actually another really
or
helpful.
left to right rather. Yeah.
No, I hear you. Yeah. So I think maybe what we can work on with the team is because most of the reasons why it's not a comprehensive is because things are still in build, right? We've submitted the request. It hasn't been released yet,
Okay,
right? So,
that may be all you need to say. Yeah.
yeah. And I think if we even just simply state that, like, our work is done. We're it's in the queue and we're waiting for release, right?
Yeah.
And so maybe we'll think about something a little more subtle to represent when we've done, we're just waiting for it to come into the ecosystem.
Yeah.
This may be more than categoric. It may be more along a continuum, and maybe is a better way to represent that. Yeah.
That sounds good. Absolutely. Um, So Carrie's talking, but at one point we talked about LOINC codes for visual screeners. Are these included in these data sets? So we did, LOINC does have capacity for them. We actually did not have, and we think about like, for instance, like the Camden cards, right? We actually haven't had a submission regarding the Camden cards in order to enable that kind of visual representation. So the moment it's submitted, we'll apply it and then go from there. But yes, there is the capacity to do that. That's very much part of the LOINC methodology. Okay. So really good ideas about how to make this more usable and intelligible. And again, a lot of it is really just testing our terminology team is so deep in all this stuff. And this is what the public is for, right? Is making sure it makes sense to the ecosystem. So we hear some information regarding placing it on the confluence and really representing the continuum a little bit better, and then also linking to USCDI. Alrighty. Okay. Again, thanks everybody. It's amazing. It's amazing to get to this point, honestly, where we're able to actually show the products of our labor. Next slide, please. All right, next slide. So this is the terminology, just brief update. We are just about to begin a public break, which is enabling the terminology team to do some writing and dissemination and build work and consider value sets and VSAC and all kinds of things to do. There is some work that's ongoing, that's kind of behind the scenes. But you'll see in the future slides that we're not going to meet again until August with this meeting on Thursday every other week. But don't you leave us, right? We'll be coming back. But I'm really proud to say that when we vote on the elder abuse set today, we will have completed a massive amount of labor together. It is really mind-numbing. Like from 2 years ago, going full stop. We had a brief break in the winter of 2000 and early 2020, I think. But we've been going full stop for a long time together. We've completed an incredible amount of work with screening and diagnoses across all the domains, and then goals and interventions in addition with some of the domains. We will come back in the fall focusing specifically on those goals and intervention concepts with the domains we covered this spring. And mostly, I just want to say thank you, right? We would not be here without all of you and our subject matter experts. And as the director of the terminology division, just incredibly proud of all the work we've done together. And just know that even though the public is breaking, the terminology team is working perhaps even harder on some of the things that we have in our docket. Really trying to make sure that we do the education piece well, because we have a lot of work to do there.
Sarah, can you say when the next meeting of this particular group will be?
Yeah, on a future slide, I think it's like the 8th. I'm trying to remember, but there's a schedule on a future slide.
Thank you.
And then, of course, this all goes in line. Bob will talk about the technical division, but I just wanted to highlight that this break begins, and then I think we come back. It'll be specifically, we made a schedule in a couple slides. So next slide, please. And then we're going to just buzz through these. There's actually not very much terminology build happening today because we're really focusing on next steps. Next slide, please. And next slide. All right, I don't think there's any questions on what we've covered so far. Please do just sit with the fact of how proud I am of our work. We really have done such an amazing job over the course of the last 2 years, and it's only up from here, my Lord. I think the projects and collaborations that Gravity is involved in continue to grow. Next slide, please. Have all the pilots been recruited for? I'm going to let Evelyn and Bob speak to that, I think. Evelyn?
Yes, we have not started pilots work stream yet. We will be soon, so we'll announce it to this community. We continue to recruit, so if you are interested in piloting, please send me an email or send it to gravityproject@EMI Advisors. We will do a formal announcement when we're ready to kick off.
All right, and then now into some terminology updates. Next slide, please. And next slide. So this is the we actually don't even have the next meeting here. So this is the elder abuse consensus vote. There was supposed to be a slide, so it's so Sarah Bahal or someone on the slide. Can you get us the date of the next meeting that's scheduled on the books? I think that we were actually saying, and I apologize for this, that the 5th was a meeting possibly depending on the work of the Interventions Council, but definitely the next Thursday, which would be the 19th. Yeah. There we go. Lovely. Thank you all. Expect, though, prior to that meeting that disseminations and emails regarding the work of the Interventions Council and the subject matter experts will be coming prior to that meeting. So there'll be materials on interventions terminology regarding our domains to review before we hit the ground on the 19th. Next slide, please. And next slide. I just wanted to, I posted this to the Strategic Advisory Committee and the Executive Committee, but I really wanted to just demonstrate to everybody who the terminology laborers are behind the scenes, right? So you all know me, right? So I'm Sarah. I'm the Director of Clinical Informatics for the Gravity Project, but I'm really honored to share this work with the ever so wise Linda Hyde, who's our lead terminology consultant. We are honored to have with us Asha Emanuel, who functions as our community liaison, and she is basically a public health consultant and brings lots of community engagement expertise. And then Katya Shell, who's joined our team, just so wonderful. So she is really expanding the capacity of our team to respond to submissions and adjudications. So this is the 4 women of the terminology team who are really surrounded by the support of EMI with project management. So this is us behind the works. So when I speak of terminology, this is the team that's doing all the work behind the scenes. Just wanted to make sure everyone knew who they were before we took a break. Next slide, please. And then we're going to go into I'm going to pass the mic to my colleague Asha, who's going to speak a little bit of the Interventions Council work that's going to be happening over the course of the summer. So when we hit the ground on the 19th and come back together, we are all collectively looking at a really robust set of intervention terminology for the domains at hand. Next slide, please. And next slide. Asha, you unmute and speak to your work.
Well, thank you, Sarah. I certainly will. Hello, Gravity Collective. I'm still pinching myself that I'm in this space to impact at this level. And I am excited to tell you about what we have going on the Interventions Council. So as you know, the Gravity Project divides each data set into 4 activities: screening, diagnosis, goal setting, and interventions, in order to represent the clinical processes and associated terminologies. So the Intervention Council will serve as a critical anchor in crafting social risk terminology for intervention activities, programs, and professions. The Intervention Council members will really be collators and identifiers for the intervention value sets. And just to give you some background on the Intervention Council members, they're coming from a diverse set of stakeholder groups across the ecosystem, including case and care managers, social workers, community health workers, and navigators. And really building off of our previous work, the Intervention Council will work to identify interventions that are critical to addressing social risk and population health, including clinic and community programs, as well as the necessary roles and professions for those interventions. And we've collated programs and professions from prior builds into a master spreadsheet for review by the Intervention Council. And it really is quite an impressive list, and it brings tears to my eyes looking at it. But really, the task ahead is to fill in intervention gaps across domains and to reflect on the value set for completeness. And the timeline for the first phase is expected to last about 3 to 4 months, with bi-weekly meetings starting at the end of this month. And we're going to start our intervention council work on the demographic domain, which includes the educational attainment, employment, and veteran status. And that's it. So we are really grateful for our council members' willingness to labor alongside us to collectively craft social risk terminology and intervention data sets. So more to come, stay tuned, and we're looking forward to this work.
Thank you, Asha. And I'm really excited that Asha gets to bring her community engagement work and expertise to this work, helping us. And I do want to state we basically birthed this idea out of the need that to really have a focused group working on interventions, because we found them to be so unique. And there are all kinds of public health experts across the group, Lucy, I can promise you. And I really love the idea of on the ground. If you want to join the intervention council work, just send an email to gravityproject@emiadvisors.net. You also can find, I think Asha and Gravity posted something on LinkedIn. There's information all over, and you can find it on the Confluence too. But if you just want to find the work and get plugged in, just send an email to gravityproject@emiadvisors.net. And I do want to state, I see a question about how it's going to integrate into the loneliness and isolation work with the national work being done with ACL. The great thing is our subject matter experts with social isolation are directly leading and involved in that work with ACL. So it's basically a cross collaboration and conduit. And as always, ACL sits on our executive committee, and there's direct alignment there as well. So I promise you, we are taking advantage of that existing work. Our SMEs are directly involved in that work, and we will leverage every pearl of wisdom and fold it into the interventions terminology for social isolation and loneliness. We are really lucky to be positioned in that spot. Thank you. And again, if you want to join the Merry Band, it's like Interventions Council Summer Camp. You can just send an email to gravityproject@emiadvisors.net. And I'm going to say, I really hope that this group coalesces as like a group of its own that's really able to continually offer information and insight across of our future domains. We really kind of we did this focus group with some of our earlier domains and found it very beneficial. All right, any other questions? Again, thank you, Asha. So grateful for your friendship and collaboration as always. Next slide, please. Any other
Sarah,
questions? Yeah.
Yeah, when this group starts to reconvene, can we hope for 5-minute presentations about the Intervention Council and how they're doing and what they're working on? Because this really is an incredible extension into the work environment, into workflow, into how all this terminology needs to be used. And when talking about social determinant interventions, there is no standard language. So this is really a huge advance right at the cutting edge. So can we be updated about this in a regular manner?
You can expect the wonderful Asha to update the group on a regular basis in all of our public meetings. Like, we hope this is kind of a standing thing once we get this group off the ground. And
Wonderful.
I do want to
Thank you.
say, I am so impressed. Like Asha says, she got tears in her eyes when she looked at the collated list of programs and professions that we've already created. Like it needs a few little tweaks before it's really final and good to go. We're a little bit perfectionist over here, even though we make mistakes sometimes. But That is an end product of our collaboration with all of you all, with 211 San Diego, with all of our, with like social workers, with our, with our experts in different health systems, so with experts in food security policy and transportation policy and housing policy. So what you see represented, eventually we'll release it to the Confluence, is so impressive, right? So these programs and their direct alignment to policy considerations and health risk considerations and community considerations and community tech considerations really are an amazing step forward with standardization. It's pretty exciting to look at. So very shortly, Lucy, we will post that to the Confluence, and it will be another example of product, like things we've made that we can share with the collective. All right, next slide, please. There's so many things to share today. It's great. All right, voting, next slide. Okay, next slide. We're very excited to say that the Gravity Project Social Isolation and Loneliness dataset reached consensus. There were a couple comments, really thoughtful comments regarding issues of like privacy and consent, but really no significant changes to the build as it stands. And we are incredibly grateful for our subject matter experts. We have a few comments and thoughts to review with them this evening as we do a wrap-up meeting, as we always do. And again, expect to consider the relationship quality element in the fall. We need to place that on the timeline, but we did endeavor to only address social isolation, and really in classic Gravity fashion addressed a whole lot more, but saved the relationship quality really for when it seemed ready for go live. And that probably will be in the fall, depending on the advice and leadership of our subject matter experts. So great work, team. And then next slide, please. The intimate partner violence master list would also reach consensus. Again, there were a couple comments. Again, super, super grateful for Chris Grasso and Lisa James, who are our subject matter experts. They also are coming back in the fall to assist us with interventions terminology, and they're also really taking leaders in our conversations regarding privacy that we're having across our terminology and technical wing, and we are incredibly grateful for them. Just wonderful folk. Next slide, please. I really wanted to highlight one specific comment that came in an email. We did have a request to consider adding specific intimate partner violence ICD codes, because if you remember on our master list, convention is to utilize the adult and child abuse codes in order to address these, then define intimate partner violence. And this is an ICD by the perpetrator. But we did have, we had a very thoughtful email that maybe it would be better to encapsulate the range of adolescent intimate partner violence and adult intimate partner violence with a specific intimate partner violence ICD code. So we are willing to endeavor that attempt with the CDC. We do recognize that that would be a significant push. So in these instances where we do not know if the attempt is likely, we kind of go forward with both truths, right? We have the set that utilizes existing terminology. We have the request to consider more specific terminology that would address what we heard from many of you, the concern of applying child abuse codes to adolescent intimate partner violence, but there's really no other choice right now. So we just wanted to let everybody know that this is something that we're willing to entertain as we go forward with the CDC. And if you have any thoughts on this, this directly aligns with comments the community had. And it was just elevated again in a really thoughtful comment from some of our experts in the terminology ecosystem. So we thought we'd give it a jolly good try. And again, this won't be anytime soon. It's not going to make it, obviously, onto the September ICD-10-CM meeting. It'll take some time to even be heard. So as it stands right now, the terminology in the master set with our proposal for new perpetrator codes is where we're going. And those perpetrator codes will be applicable regardless where we go. Okay, Any questions on this, which is really, this is a comment that came in that we wanted to elevate, that we're going to investigate, but we don't know how successful it will be. Yeah, and Lucy, it's just, this realm is very challenging. It's just a really, really emotionally intense domain to cover. All right, next slide, please. Any questions on the successful consensus vote for social isolation, loneliness, and intimate partner violence? Yeah, so Carrie, yeah, there will be. So just like our other ICD-10 submissions, so whenever we go forward with new ICD-10 requests, we will solicit support from the community as we have in the past. So right now with the CDC, we're really working the submission we had prior. So there's all those codes coming in October. We are going to revisit codes in September that were part of that original submission. We can imagine in March, in December, submitting a new request for consideration for terminology at the March meeting. And when that happens, we will be soliciting the Gravity collective for letters of support. Absolutely. Next slide, please. All right. Next slide. Here we are. I think maybe our one of our wise subject matter experts for elder abuse is still on the call. It's interesting. There's so much to report on here. I thought it'd be a short call and we're just talking. Next slide, please. Again, I really can't say enough about the subject matter experts that we have across all of our different domains. Like it's just an honor to learn with them and from them, and they're very, very kind, offering their time and their expertise. So Dr. Ron Asierno, Jason Burnett, Dr. Zach Kasumis, and Dr. Tony Rosen, they've been meeting with us weekly on Friday mornings at 10 a.m. Eastern Time for quite some time. So grateful for all of their support. And just there is more work to come with these individuals too, and they've already informed us they're willing to come back and consider some of the elements that we didn't get to in this set of builds, such as the considerations of abuse with vulnerable non-elder adults. So these are some of the things that we raise as a community and want to make sure we get right. Next slide, please. It's important to note a couple updates again. So if you hadn't looked at the master in a little bit, there are some really critical new things to note. In order to assist to future build in LOINC, we added specific look back periods that you can flip through depending on the behavioral screening method, really meeting two different conventions for screening. So one is since age 60, which is the lowest denominator of defining an elder across all state policy in the US. So some states have 60, some states 65. So we decided the best approach was to start with the lowest denominator, and then you could apply state policy to figure out whether there's a mandatory reporting situation or not. And then in the last 12 months, which more closely mirrors some of the cyclical yearly screening methodology and how we look at quality reporting as well. We also, at the advice of one of our community members, added elder to all of the elder abuse subtype definitions. Based on a comment by a community member, we added an abuse by unrelated caregiver SNOMED code to mirror an existing abuse by related caregiver code. We did add history of codes to the set because you have a possibility of a historical look back with that since age 60 screening look back approach with the behavioral screening method, and even some of the existing screeners we have give you a very wide time frame. So we wanted to allow for identification of historical abuse. So we did add those codes, and then when we audited our master sets, we realized we were missing some of our subtypes across our build. We really have suspected, confirmed, historical, and so we've stuck in financial abuse because we were missing it in a couple of our different sections. So these are all kind of really like tangible updates that we had to make. Nothing too earth-shattering. Any questions on these before we go into the vote? All right, okay, next slide, please. You all know how this goes, and again, it gets me kind of emotional. This is our last vote for this push, guys. We've done an amazing amount of work. So there are 4 different possible votes, right? So there is yes. A yes vote does not necessarily mean that the deliverable is the ideal one, but it's better to move forward than block the deliverable. Yes with comment is if you feel like you believe in the content and you support the content, but you have issues that you want to raise, and you can hear that we've this happens, right? Which is why there are some updates since our vote. You say yes with comment, and then it's important to note you always have a week to submit your comments to the Gravity Project, right? So it has to be, comments have to be emailed to us to review by 7:15, and we are getting quite good with a rapid turnaround with our comments. We try to get them back within a week of receipt, but sometimes we get them back within days. A formal objection, this formal objection has to include comments indicating a path to address the objection, so you can't just say I object. You have to say I object, and it has to be changed this way. And it also has to make sure that if your rejection has to address the known conversation and concerns of other members of the project. So we are a collective, so it's important to consider the conversations that have come prior, and it can't be so markedly dissonant from the agreement we've come to so far. Again, email comments to the Gravity Project at emiadvisors.net by 7:15/21, and then of course you can always abstain. Next slide, please.
Sarah, I sent an email comment and it has not been acknowledged. Do we expect to be acknowledged, or do we just have to keep checking back to see what happened to our comment?
You can, Lucy, did you send that to me at the Gravity at my Gmail account, or did you send it to the Gravity Project?
I sent it to the Gravity Project.
Okay, so I just want to make sure, because I did see a comment to me there. So I wanted, you can always expect to get a receipt. We don't always say got it.
Okay.
But we do track everything, and I'll just we have a meeting tomorrow at 1:00. We will specifically review your comment, and we will get back to you
Fine.
right after the meeting.
That's fine. Thank you.
Yeah. So someone has a question, maybe Carrie does, maybe a silly question. Which of these abuse categories apply to disabled patients if they're not in a partner, elder, or child? So yeah, so Carrie, that's exactly what I just mentioned in my statement of luckily the elder abuse subject matter experts still like us and want to come and hang around a little longer, because we do need to consider when vulnerable adults who are not children or intimate partners experience abuse. And we have that on our roadmap to come. It's coming because it does require a report to Adult Protective Services in most states. Yeah. All right. So as usual, you have until tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to complete the Google form. It was just dropped in to the chat. As always, if you would like us to email you the form, just send an email to gravityproject@emiadvisors.net and we will reply with the form. It's really super easy. We want to make it as easy as we possibly can. And then don't forget to submit your comments to us by a week. So everything is available in the chat for you. So you have your, and again, you might have to double click in order to get to the form because of WebEx being weird. But we expect you always can email again to get if you can't access via the chat. And we look forward to getting this votes. And friends, this is our final vote of this screening and diagnosis push for these domains. It really is incredible work. I'm very proud of all of that. It really is just so amazing. All right, anybody still capturing the link? Do we need to give a little bit more time before we segue into our next work? Yeah, so so it's in the chat above, Matt, but can we drop it in one more time? Because there was some combo. It'd be great to drop in the forms link one more time. There we go. So there it is one more time. And if you have any trouble, that the terminology team and the amazing Sarah Bahal and Carrie Lausberg, who are project management support, are here to help you at gravityprojectemiadvisors.net. Okay. Do we need to wait any longer? Are we good to go? Okay, next slide. And next slide. I believe this is my, I believe that I am done. And so you will not hear my voice until August 19th, and I will miss you also. Maybe I'll come back for the next steps, but off to Bob. Bob, are you ready?
I'm ready. Thank you, Sarah. Next slide, please. So we are here. We have completed incorporating or providing dispositions to all of the ballot comments from the ballot that we had in January. We have incorporated all of the dispositions into the implementation guide. We have moved patient stories to Confluence and replaced them with functional use cases to match what we're doing with other fire implementation guides. And we are done. So we're going through the formal approval process right now to go to publication. And the expectation is over the next couple of weeks, we will see the excuse me, standard for trial use version 1 of the implementation guide published by HL7. So that's it. So we want to thank a lot of people that have been involved, but in particular, Corey Smith and Monique Van Berkom from the AMA, who have done a tremendous amount of work. Lloyd McKenzie from Jevity, who has been our technical advisor on making sure that we understood any of the intricacies of the fire standard and we dealt with them appropriately. And Jim Shaley, who has been involved with our work in incorporating our approach to terminologies as we move forward. So this is the end of this work. Like Sarah, we thank everyone for participating, particularly those that have been involved with the Wednesday calls and providing feedback on the implementation guide, and those that have been involved in the connectathons and testing it and the reference implementation. The next step for us, next slide, please. This is just to remind you, the guide covers all of the blue arrows. So it is the ability to communicate between providers, payers, referral platforms, and community-based organizations. Next slide, please. So our next step is the Fire Connectathon that CMS is holding. It is July 20th through the 22nd. Our track is on the 21st. If you haven't registered for it, unfortunately, it's too late. We have 35 people that have registered from 31 organizations. And of those, 13 from 12 organizations have also signed up for specific roles on the Confluence site. We still have a link here to the Confluence site. If you're interested in expressing a role that you're going to play, please sign up. We will have a meeting next week on Monday for those that are going to be involved in the track to go through the reference implementation, go through the implementation guide, and make sure that everyone has the support they need for the Connectathon on the 21st. And I believe that, the other thing is we are going to continue the Wednesday calls. Our focus will be primarily on defining what we need to do for the STU2 version of the guide. Our expectation is we will take that to ballot in January of 2022. So basically 1 year after we took the STU1 to ballot. So please come join us. We'll work through what we need to be doing in addition to what's already in the implementation guide to bring out a standard for use trial 2. Questions? Okay. So Sarah, I think we can hand it back over to you. Most of our conversations happen on the Wednesday calls.
Wonderful. All right, so next slide, down to the homework. Next slide. Oh, look, the homework is so little. So we should say submit your votes. That is really the next big step. We really want to make sure we have robust votes of a good quorum of our committed members voting for the elder abuse set. Take a break. Join us on the Interventions Council if you wish. Send an email, and we will see you in August. And really, you can expect to get continued emails from us because we will be producing educational material and there'll be updates to the Confluent. So we'll see you in about a month. And just so grateful for all of you. It's been a really impressive set of work, and we'll see you as we focus on interventions and goal setting in late summer. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good summer.